The word hegemony is a very interesting one. It's been used very frequently during the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States. And today we still have the word circulating amongst nation states. Nation states use the word hegemony. They seek hegemony. They have hegemony. Some of them have hegemony. The question is, what is hegemony? All right, so let's take a closer look here. Now, it says here hegemony is dominance, right? This is the key word here, dominance. Hegemony equals to dominance. So the formula then is, right, hegemony here equals to dominance. That's the formula. This is dominance. That's the formula. So H equals to D. And that's the way to look at this. H equals to D, hegemony equals to dominance. Now, we have dominance in many categories. It says here, hegemony is dominance of one state over the others, right? So one state over the others. And then it further says it can be in different spheres, such as political dominance of countries on the global stage, military dominance, economic dominance, and even cultural dominance, right? So nation states seek dominance. That's what they do. That's who they are. They seek dominance over other states in many, many regards. So, for example, they seek to have political dominance where they want to be the ones to make decisions. They want to be the ones to call the shots, so to speak. In the United Nations, they want to dominate other nation states because they have power, right? They have power. So, in political dominance, then, they have their ideology. This is ideology, right? Ideology is supreme. They want the ideology to be supreme, to be followed by all. In political dominance, in economic dominance as well, right? So we have countries today that have dominance in the different spheres that we're talking about. So for example, we have political dominance. So here you have the United States today, political dominance. You have China, political dominance, right? In different areas around the world. For example, China has a lot of dominance in developing countries. Political and economic dominance in developing countries. That's hegemony. They have hegemony in those countries, over those countries. They determine policies, they determine terms of loans, they determine terms of partnership and so forth, etc. That's political, that's economic dominance, right? So we have USA and China dominating today. We have European Union, for example, as a collective body dominating in terms of trade. Their interaction with other parts of the world, their interaction with South American countries, their interaction with Asian countries, their interaction with African countries. That's hegemony because they have power, they have the resources, they have the means, they're able to dominate in this area, right? So we have military dominance as well. And today, in terms of military dominance, we have many countries that are dominating in the global stage. Again, the United States has military power. We have Russia has military power. We have China has military power as well, right? And then we have, of course, other countries like France and UK, all with military power, right? So they're all seeking hegemony to dominate in these different spheres. So it says here, when, let's get rid of this here. So it says here, when there is hegemony, there is always competition by other states to resist the hegemony and attempt, right, to assert themselves as dominating power. So there is a competition. It's a competition between and sometimes among several powers because they don't want one power to have that hegemony. So they seek to overthrow that nation state that has hegemony and assert themselves. This is the politics of nation states. Nation states look out for national interest. They look out for their national interest, right? And most of them will do anything to achieve that national interest. All right, so let's take a closer look at this again. It says, when there is hegemony, there is always competition by other states, right, to resist the hegemony. So once again, we look at the example of the United States, USA versus the Soviet Union. During the Cold War, right, there was hegemony, right? The United States had its spheres of influence, which was military influence, which was NATO, and the Soviet had its spheres of influence, military influence, which was the Warsaw Pact, right? So both countries had their spheres of influence. They had hegemony in their different respective areas, etc., right? And they were seeking to overthrow the other in terms of hegemony, to overtake the other in terms of hegemony, and be supreme. That's what this means. So when there is hegemony, there is always competition by states to resist hegemony and attempt to assert themselves as dominating power, right? So we need to understand this concept in a very clear way and to understand how it works, how it plays out in the global scene. Now, there's also another type of hegemony, which is ideology, right? So ideology, hegemony can also be framed within the context of ideology. What does that mean? It means that when countries or when a particular group of people in a society dominate others in that society with their language, with their culture, right, with their norms and traditions and so forth, right? That's hegemony as well. So if you're among the minority group in that society, you find yourself pandering to the majority group. You find yourself pandering to their interests and to their preferences and so forth. So, for example, in some Western societies, right, Christianity is the dominant religion, and therefore Christmas is celebrated, Easter is celebrated, Good Friday is celebrated, etc. Right? That's one form of hegemony, because then the dominant group is saying to all others within that society that you have to follow these norms, traditions, and customs. So everything is closed on Easter, everything is closed on Good Friday, on Christmas Day, everything is closed, because that's the dominant group's ideology. That's their custom, that's their tradition, that's their belief. That's another form of hegemony. All right, so let's take a look at this concept within the historical context. So it says here, this concept goes as far back to ancient Greece, where hegemony meant the political military dominance of the hegemon city-state over other city-states. Right? So this is not a new ideology. It's not a new concept. It's not a new terminology. It's been around for centuries. We can trace it back to ancient Greece as well, as we just mentioned, where, for example, right, hegemony meant political military dominance. So political and military dominance in ancient Greece of hegemon city-state over the other city-states. That is hegemony. That is hegemony today. That's how hegemony is defined. In modern day, you see hegemony between the United States and China. In the military sense, in the economic sense, we see hegemony of Russia trying to dominate its environment, invading Ukraine, for example, and declaring republics. That's hegemony, because it has power, it has the resources, it has the means. So for hegemony to be effective, this is a very important point here. For hegemony to be effective, a nation state must have one, resources. Two, it must have means to use those resources to influence. Three, it must have political power, or it must have military power, or it must have economic power, whatever the case may be. It must have all of those things, right? And be able to dominate others using those resources, using those means, using political power, and of course, influence, right? Must have influence as well. This is influence. Must have influence, whereby it's influencing other nation states and dominating those nation states. And finally, it must have ideology as well, right? The ideology that it proposes and tries to impose on others as a means of hegemony, as a means of domination. So this is hegemony.